It's another UFC card, and that means I'm here to give my thoughts about it. Welcome to Mio on MMA, and we are talking today about the Holy Holm versus Ketlin Viera card. This card, it has a lot of weird feelings for me. There are a lot of fights on this card that actually might be pretty good. They also might be absolutely terrible. And that describes pretty much every fight in existence, of course. There's always a small chance that a fight will be terrible, and a small chance that a fight will be the greatest fight of all time. That being said, it's a lot more in this case, and there's not really a lot of middle ground. Like, there are fights that either are really going to click, really going to bring it, or really, really not going to bring it. The main event is not one of those ones. I feel like we're in for a not particularly great fight between Holly Holm and Ketlin Viera. It's not any particular dislike for either fighter. They both know what they are. They both execute the game plan that they have built. Nothing about their game is particularly confusing. The fighters that I tend to have a real problem with are like fighters who are missing something or fight a game that doesn't at all work for their physicality, their body type in some cases, and don't really seem to be getting much better. Whereas like Holly Holm is a well-built outside striker, albeit one that actually isn't terribly great at finding her range. She is low volume, but she makes up for that by being fairly tall, puts things together fairly well, and will throw when the correct triggers are there. She's built like a typical Jackson Wink fighter, essentially. And we've seen this matchup a little bit before, and that was the Ketlin Viera versus Yanakunitskaya fight. Yanakunitskaya, who is not by any means a clone of Holly Holm in any way, but, oops, I just knocked over a water bottle. But they are from that same kind of Jackson Wink, specifically Mike Winklejohn striking camp of looking for keys and the ability to exploit the triggers that they have available. And Viera, well, she lost that fight. And I think Holly Holm is just a much more difficult version of that fight because Holm is incredibly underrated as a clinch wrestler. She's not easy to take down. She's not easy to control in the clinch. And that tends to be what Viera makes the best use of because, while I'd said Holly Holm was kind of a low volume striker, that doesn't really matter here because Viera is actually even a lower volume striker. She does have a way of landing surprisingly powerful shots at awkward angles and awkward moments. But otherwise, her striking game is just kind of a low volume power game. I don't see what she asks Holly Holm that we haven't seen Holly Holm answer in abundance before. So in that regard, this is a pretty boring fight. And it's one that Holm will probably win by decision. This being said, Holm is 40. There is always a chance that she's going to kind of fall off the rails at some point. That hasn't happened yet. And I don't even think that this is necessarily the fight that would punish her for that because, like I said, Viera's not really going to turn the heat up. She's not going to turn the wick up. She's not going to go for a high output style of fight that Holm, if her gas tank, if her reactions, if so on are actually fading, that there would really be a problem. So the main event is pretty dull. Holly Holm probably going to win. Let's move on to the co-main. The co-main is Santiago Ponzinibio versus Michel Peja. This could obviously be a very good fight. There's always a chance that Michel Peja will be very exciting, will be wacky, will be frustrating as all hell because, frankly, if he gave up on some of his really showy stuff, he would probably be a better fighter. But that's not Michel Peja, and when he does fight super fundamental, He's kind of dull because he doesn't have necessarily the skill set to actually do that. I like Ponzinibio's chances. There's always a chance that Peja will just like absolutely destroy someone on a physical level because he has that physicality. There's a reason that someone with such an atypical game has made it to the UFC, and you could argue should be undefeated because his 2 losses are to Tristan Connolly in a decision that I'm really still to this date not really sold Connolly won. And of course the Diego Sanchez DQ loss for the illegal knee. Now, that one I have no problem with. I've given some thoughts on that before. I think Diego Sanchez take the easy way out? Yes. But I think he's also earned that with the amount of brain cells he's given up in the octagon. And the fact that it was a pretty blatant knee. I honestly think that a lot of fighters should actually just take the freaking DQ loss half the time. Because fouls are really, really, really common. It's the same thing with the Mike Jackson-Dean Barry fight. Like, do I believe Mike Jackson could fight on? Yes. Do I believe Dean Barry deserved the chance to continue to fight on? No. So, what about this fight is interesting? Well, Ponzinibio is just always interesting. He's never going to really have a dull fight. He can be high volume brawler. He can be a technical surgeon. He has a great ability to work the legs, work the body. His wrestling and his ground game are actually not bad, but they're things that he's probably better off not having to rely on. And I don't recommend wrestling with Peja if I'm him. I would be working the legs, establish your range, establish the volume, make Peja throw a lot of punches to keep up with you, throw a lot of strikes to keep up with you, because his form does not lend itself to a long-term fight. He will gas out. He will get tired. He is defensively suspect to being worked to the body and to the legs. I think Ponzinibio can win this fight. But to be honest, we come out in the first round, Peja could lock up with him, and there could be an instant physicality difference because Ponzinibio is kind of sliding his way down, and Peja, even if these two were both in their primes, Peja would be the more physical fighter. So it's a dangerous fight, but a very winnable one for Ponzinibio, and I think he will win. I think he'll get like a 3rd round stoppage here. I just think that he will force a pace on Peja that Peja will try to match and will gas himself out in the process. So I'm looking forward to that fight. That's a fun fight. Another fun fight should be Chidi Njokuani versus Duško Todorovic. Todorovic is an offensively potent fighter. He's powerful. He's got excellent build for the weight class. But defensively, he's a mess. Like, his defense is, I'm 6'1" at middleweight. I have a 74-inch reach. I will use that reach to insulate myself from having to deal with the power and the pocket striking game. And when that does not work, as you can see from the Gregory Rodriguez fight and the Punahele Seriano fights, which he lost fairly convincingly, it kind of falls apart. And I think Chidi Njokuani is going to be able to solve that puzzle. Because, I mean, I talked about 6'1" being like, range, security, and whatever. Njokuani is a 6'3", 80-inch reach middleweight. He's very lanky, very tall, very adept at everything you could think of offensively. I did pick against him when he debuted in the UFC against Marc-Andre Barrio because I thought Barrio could put forward pressure on him and make the fight ugly. And I think that avenue for victory is still there. And it's going to be there for every opponent he has in the UFC because he is pretty bad at that kind of fight. He becomes very worried about wrestling, and it shuts down the potency that he has on the feet and even in the clinch. It's just that Todorovic doesn't really do that. He has a wrestling game. He has a clinch game. He has a pressure game. But they're not his primary go-to. That's not how he likes to fight generally. And if you're going to give Injakwani an outside to pocket striking battle, you're probably going to lose it. And that's where I see this going. So I see Injakwani winning this fight and sending Todorovic to his third loss in 4 fights. So they did beat Maki Pitolo. That was pretty impressive. I'm surprised that it's only a 190 favorite for Injakwani. I think that should be wider. Pollyanna Viana versus Tabitha Richie. I'm not sure who I would pick in this fight if it wasn't for the size differential. Viana is a legitimately sized strawweight. Richie is honestly more of an atom weight. She's 5'1", not particularly thickly built, only has a 62-inch reach. So she's got 5 inches of reach disadvantage. She's got 4 inches of height disadvantage. I think Viana's the heavier fighter. They're both essentially grapplers whose stand-up is very much a secondary skill. Viana's, I think, is better. But I'm not even sure if Viana's is better necessarily, or if it's just that Viana hits harder. And therefore, when she fights people, she at least makes them respect her stand-up because she can hit hard. Whereas Richie does not hit hard, does not have a well-put-together striking game, does have actually reasonably fast hands. So, like, there's some physical building blocks there. But, yeah, I mean, on one hand, Viana did lose to Veronica Macedo by armbar. And this fight is really similar to that. And she did lose to Hannah Seifers, who is also someone she should have been able to bully, physically speaking. But Hannah Seifers fights at a higher pace and actually has a striking game that is kind of well built. She's just very much physically capped. Like, Richie's the same, has a physical cap, but also I don't think has the style to make up for that. I hate to say there's just no real room for Richie in the UFC because she does seem like a lovely, lovely person. But I do honestly really think that she's an atomweight. I'm kind of curious. Has she fought at atomweight before? Where was she fighting before this? No, I'm seeing strawweight. So if she can make atomweight, she hasn't done it yet. Of course, that could just be a lack of options. There's not a lot of atomweight fights in the world. So yeah, I'm taking Viana to win by decision. She usually finishes by submission. I think her last 2 fights she's won by armbar in both cases against Mallory Martin and Emily Whitmire. I don't really see her submitting Richie. I feel like the technical grappling aspects of this fight are actually very equal. I don't think that either of them is really going to soundly outgrapple the other on a technical level. I just think that Viana is stronger, bigger. And like it or not, she actually does have a TKO victory over Amanda Hebus. I have never seen the fight, and I really want to because I feel I need to know what the deal with that was. Oh, Eric Andrews versus Jung Young Park. I'm taking Park because I don't think Andrews is good at anything. Eric Andrews is a former NFL player, obviously has the massive physicality, akin to Matt Mitrione or Brendan Schaub, who never played in the NFL, but was a very high-level athlete, from a football background. Like, Andrews has a lot of physicality, but it's never really brought anything in the cage. His sense of timing, his sense of distance, his decision-making at every turn within the cage is wrong. He could still win fights, but his fights the fights that he tends to win are over people who kind of are just bullies, like Darren Stewart. He did beat Gerald Mershart. I guess that's something. Vinicius Moreira, Tim Williams, Marcus Perez. Came in and did really well actually early on. Beat Brendan Allen. He's actually a pretty good anti-grappler. I guess that's the one thing I guess I'll give him, because you get a win against Brendan Allen, you get a win against Gerald Mershart. Like, there has to be some reasonable defensive chops there as a grappler. But Park doesn't want to grapple with him. Park's going to predominantly just kind of like establish the pocket boxing and box him up. And Anderson's striking game is exceedingly thin. He's very tough, though, so probably goes to decision, and I'm taking Park by decision. But I don't know. I'm hoping I'm wrong, but this fight just seems really bad. Speaking of really bad, I'm picking Alan Amedovski to probably knock out Joseph Holmes. Amedovski is not good. Not good. He lost to John Phillips. He lost to Krzysztof Yutko. He beat absolutely no one to get to the UFC. First Macedonian fighter in the UFC. But Joseph Holmes he's 6'4" with an 80-inch reach. So, similar physicality to similar reach and like engagement levels to like Injakwani. But God, is he bad and not very athletic. I just feel like when it comes down to it, Amedovski is not good, but he's at least aggressive and will make chaos happen and is comfortable in that chaos. Holmes is just really tall. That's kind of it. I wouldn't be surprised if Amedovski lost, but I don't know what Amedovski losing looks like. Parker Porter, Jilton Almeida. I'm really hoping for Jilton Almeida to win because he looks like an actually decent prospect, although more at 205 than it is at heavyweight. Although, at 6'3", he's not terribly sized for heavyweight. He's got a good, crisp power striking game. He's got good takedowns. He's got good top game. And Parker Porter is just kind of gritty. He's got decent paced striking, good combinations. But at the end of the day, he's not very athletic. He's reasonably tough. But I think if Almeida is worth the hype and, the legitimate promise that he looks like he has, he should be able to win this fight kind of wherever it is. He should be able to win the striking exchanges for the most part. Should be able to get the fight to the ground if he needs to, and should be able to control from top. Omar Morales versus Eros Medic. This is another pretty good one. Kind of a sleeper. Morales is back at 155 after a jaunt down to 145, which was a mixed bag. He lost to Giga Chikadze, which is no shame because Chikadze has proven to be actually a really, really good fighter. And he lost to Jonathan Pierce and then beat Shane Young, then lost to Jonathan Pierce. Medic is not very good. He's a 6'1" lightweight. So he's tall, he's long, he's lanky. He is powerful. He does definitely hurt people. He has a lethality on the feet. But his game isn't very deep. And it's very defensively irresponsible. He will throw a lot of naked kicks and a lot of ill-advised shots. And Morales is pretty sound defensively. Again, went 15 minutes with Giga Chikadze without getting finished. That's pretty impressive. I keep going back and forth. Like on one hand, like I could totally see Medic catching Morales with something. He just is going to be insistent about that he's dangerous. But I have to go with Morales. I think he has better fundamentals. He's not flashy, not terribly high-paced, not really going anywhere in the division. But he does what he does pretty well. He minds his P's and Q's on defense. He lands some good counter shots. He's got quality boxing, will mix in kicks, is pretty physically impressive. And what is the reach in this fight? Because that's the question. Because I firmly believe that Medic, whenever confronted by somebody who actually has reach. Now, I don't believe it's 71-inch reach that gets listed for him. I think he has more of a reach than that, and he definitely has more of a reach in his legs. But he is facing Morales, who's reasonably tall and does use his reach pretty well. So I do believe Morales will break this down and probably get a second or third round stoppage. Jonathan Martinez, Vince Morales. I've not been impressed with Vince Morales. That's kind of really it's kind of really the extent of it. He's got a wrestling background supposedly, but his wrestling is not very good. I think he averages 0.19 takedowns per fight. That's not good. And he's got something like a 25% hit ratio. Martinez should be able to get this job done. He can utilize a lot of what Chris Gutierrez did to Morales to get the job done. Lurk the low kicks, work the body a little bit, throw some counter punches that really makes Morales think twice because he doesn't really have an answer for when you're countering him beyond to just trying to kind of face check stuff. And Martinez, I think, will probably finish him. I really like Martinez. I think he's got a really good game. And I feel like this is just a weird matchmaking choice because he's coming off a win over Alejandro Perez. He's coming off a win over Zvad Lajikvili. This doesn't feel like a move up. And that loss to Davey Grant that he has looks pretty good. He does have a loss to Andrei Sukupta and Andrei Ewell on his record, which is a little bit less awesome, but it does really feel like he's putting some things together, and I expect good things for him. And this feels like just not nearly a high enough profile fight. Last two fights on the card, Felipe Colarus versus Chase Hooper. Taking Colarus. Colarus is a physically capped fighter. He's tough. He's got good cardio, and he will adapt and make good decisions across the fight, but he's not very fast, not very powerful, not very he just doesn't have the physicality to be a high level fighter. But Hooper probably also doesn't have the physicality. And Hooper also is an incredibly only specialist. He wants to grapple, he wants to take your back. And that's kind of all he's good at. I think Colarus can survive any bad moments that Hooper puts him in because he survived against Luke Sanders, who is kind of a way more physically gifted version of this matchup. And admittedly a little less technical and a little bit more crazy, frankly. Sanders is his own worst enemy. But could Hooper get his back and choke him out or get the tap? Yeah. He could do that to probably just about anybody. He is dangerous on the ground, but my God, is his stand-up not very good, and his takedown game is also not very good. This kid got pretty much wrecked by he's in the UFC too early. Just too early. He got wrecked by Steven Peterson. Yeah, I've got Colarus winning by decision. He's tough enough that he probably will see the judges' scorecards, but that's about it. I'm taking Elise Reed to beat Sam Hughes by decision. I just am not a believer in Sam Hughes. Elise Reed is a limited fighter. She's got good accuracy, good timing with some of her kicks and also her punches. She's got a good feel for countering. She's quick, not necessarily that hard of a puncher, but like Sam Hughes, one, I'm not sure what she's supposed to be good at, and two, I don't think she even knows because she's determined to be a boxer and a striker, and all of her success is actually when she grapples, but she has to be convinced to grapple. Like I said, I'm not a big believer in Elise Reed, but at least Elise Reed knows what she's limited in, knows what she's good in, and fights accordingly. Sam Hughes doesn't do that, and that's the type of fighter that I cannot, in good conscience, trust. And also physically pretty limited and not particularly skilled. We also got Eagle FC 47. There's a couple of fights on here that are worth talking about. Jorge Castro is going to be fighting Junior Dos Santos. Dos Santos should win the fight. He's not the guy he used to be for obvious reasons. 4-fight losing streak. 38 years old, but yes, getting finished in 4 consecutive fights is a problem, but is by Gone, Rosenstruck, Blades, Ngannou. These guys are on an incredibly different level to Jorge De Castro. De Castro does hit reasonably hard. He has some good feels for timing, but he's a low output striker. He doesn't gauge range very well. He's going to let Junior Dos Santos dictate the flow of the fight, and I think Dos Santos should easily win it unless his chin is just completely gone. Thiago Silva versus Hector Lombard. Oh, Lord. I'm not picking Lombard to beat anyone who has any kind of power. I don't believe in Thiago Silva. I don't really know if I ever did believe in Thiago Silva, if we're being completely honest. But yeah, I can't pick Lombard. I can't. This is a 205 fight too. I'm pretty sure. No. Silva by TKO. Maki Pitolo to beat Doug Usher. I get why Pitolo got cut from the UFC. He had a really rough run. He's 14-9, so the record doesn't look very good. But he's a good little action fighter. I wish him the best, and Usher's just not particularly great. So yeah, we'll take Maki Pitolo Coconut Bombs to pick up a TKO win here at some point. Then we got Gabriel Checko versus Andrew Sanchez. I like Gabriel Checko, actually. He's an interesting grappler. He pulls off some interesting and at times ill-advised stuff, but also dynamic stuff. But I do also think he's going to lose to Andrew Sanchez. Actually, I was kind of surprised to see that Andrew Sanchez wasn't in the UFC. He was a tough winner. They usually keep those guys around for a pretty long time as long as they're producing okay. And it's not like Sanchez was on any kind of major losing streak. He had lost to Bruno Silva and Mahmoud Muradov. But in a nutshell, if you look at the guys who have beaten him, it's almost exclusively guys who are going to outstrike him in some way. Dustin Jacoby, Kevin Casey, who's not a great striker, but is a powerful one. Anthony Smith. The Ryan James fight shouldn't really count. He just cast out and got knocked out. Marvin Vittori, Bruno Silva, and Mahmoud Muradov. The path to beating Sanchez has not ever really been grappling. And that's why I'm surprised that they did this fight, because I think that Eagle is trying to make something out of Gabriel Checko. He lost to Rashad Evans last time out, and I think they're kind of leading him to the slaughter here again. Ahmed Alia versus Daryl Horcher. I am taking Alia to win this fight. Horcher, short run in the UFC, not particularly good in PFL, has historically lost to guys who can just grapple with him. And Aliev can do that. Not super exciting, but he'll probably win a decision here. What is it with guys named Aliev and being kind of dull, lockdown top grapplers? As far as I know, they're also not related. Islam Mamedov, Zach Zane. Zach Zane is 15-12. That's all you need to know. God's Warriors going down. Ronnie Marquez versus Reggie Pena. I am taking Ronnie Marquez. Another dull fighter, but the thing is that you kind of need to have a reasonable level of anti-grappling and athleticism to beat him. I guess you could argue that maybe Sean O'Connell doesn't have that, but still. But Victor Nemkov, Brandon Halsey, Linton Vassell, Said Sawa. Salma, pardon me. And then, like, of course, his UFC running is Yo Romero and Thiago Santos. Enough said. He'll probably get the job done here. And hey, Roosevelt Roberts makes an appearance, and he'll probably beat Alexander de Almeida. And I've got Sean Soriano to beat a just not very good fighter in Paulo Silva. So Elite X, Eagle FC is getting to the point where, like, there's a lot of notable names. I mean, that was a lot of notable names for what is essentially a regional card. But we're not at the point where the depth is there to actually have good matchups. Like, they're all very simple dynamics, not super deep into them. And there's a reason I went through almost the entire card in, like, less than 10 minutes. So to make up some time, I knew this was going to be short. There's also one card, but the MMA bouts on it are not that interesting. There is some cool kickboxing and Muay Thai stuff on there. If you love that, go watch that. That's at 6 a.m. Tomorrow I'm filming this at noon Eastern time. And at 6 a.m., that card's going to be on. But the show is Mio on MMA. There's not really a lot of interesting MMA to talk about on that card. But the striking stuff, chef's kiss. So I got a couple of questions. I asked for some questions last time, and I did get some from Twitter as well as people on the Discord. So thank you to you people. We're going to open up with a question from Toby. Toby, my man, how are you doing? It's all good. Toby wants to know, essentially, the deal with Tony Kelly. If you recall, in my last episode, I said that I didn't go super deep on Tony Kelly when I was talking about him. I did tell the story of the MTV Cage, how he was on that, and the reason why I watched the show. Okay, let's go full spectrum here. So, obviously, the problem right now is Tony Kelly with the dirty Mexican thing, or the dirty Brazilians thing. And people are debating, it's not racist, Brazil's a country. I think if you look at the social media presence of Tony Kelly in general, there is not the nicest things or the general best things to be said about the Latino, South American, Hispanic community. So I don't think he's terribly great with that kind of stuff. Beyond that, though, beyond some unfortunately worded things that are probably xenophobic, and if not xenophobic, then racist, you also have the criminal problems. He's had a number of criminal issues, including twice violence towards women. And to be clear, I'm not one of these people who believes you never can hit a girl. There are circumstances in life that violence towards a woman is excusable. But it's also something that should not happen for most of us once, and definitely should not happen twice. And the fact that one of MMA's most famous domestic violence cases is Andrea KGB Lee, and they are dating. This is obviously a bit of an eyebrow raiser. And there's the conspiracy theories such as driving, I believe it was 20 hours instead of taking a 1-hour flight because he wouldn't get a vaccine and he wouldn't wear a mask and his freedoms were hurt. I guess there's not anything tremendously deeper to go into about other than, realistically speaking, he is kind of in that Colby Covington political area of the right. He is a conspiracy theorist. He has definitive impulse control issues, which leads to him probably saying things that he, in hindsight, probably knows he shouldn't. And, of course, he's now playing the cancel culture card, which I think is silly. Because, I hate to say this, because this should not be the case, but I think this whole thing has actually just benefited him. I think the fight he has booked with Adrian Yanez has become way higher profile. It was a fight that before was just kind of weird matchmaking. And it's still weird matchmaking. I mean, that hasn't been fixed. But it's now weird matchmaking where people have an incentive to watch Adrian Yanez beat someone's ass. So, I don't know. I as much as I don't think that Tony Kelly's actions really affect the sport all that much, this is MMA. These are people with impulse control issues. The concept of MMA fighters saying the darndest things, to borrow from the TV show, is never going to go away. Like, we're always going to have it. And we're probably going to have the cancel culture thing for a bit, because if it's good enough for politicians to run on, I mean, MMA fighters are 100% going to latch out of that. So, I don't know. I guess there isn't really that much more to go into. The only thing I think I didn't mention before was the violence towards women accusations and legal troubles that he had. But there's that. Another question here from Rune via Twitter. The Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza fight has gotten him thinking about the idea that fighters head into rematches with mental blocks that fear the outcome of the prior match, and they overcorrect to being incredibly passive to avoid it. And do I think that there's any merit to that being a possibility? I think that definitely happened with Rose, but I think it's definitely also a very, very uncommon reaction, because if you look at the history of MMA rematches, there are not that many that actually fit the Rose Carla 2 dynamic. There's Tito Ortiz fighting Chuck Liddell for the second time, and honestly fighting him hard and fighting him no differently than you would expect him to fight. Otherwise, you have GSP winning after losing to Matt Hughes and Matt Serra. You have Matt Hughes fighting BJ Penn after losing to him the first time, and really still kind of fighting the same fight. And there are other options with this as well. Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture, so on. I don't think I'm the guy to ask about the whole, like, what is Rose going through mentally as far as, like, Carla Esparza is concerned, because I find myself unable to really relate to Thug Rose's mentality. And I don't mean that as like a negative diss or whatever, just stating of a fact that I don't really feel that there is that I have a grasp on it, that I know what's going on there. Because when I look, relating to my life here for a moment, I am a sub 6 foot tall guy who has a hard time keeping weight off. So I fluctuate probably about, my healthy weight's probably somewhere around the 180 to maybe 210 range. And I'll usually be a little bit above that. Right now I'm about 245. And I'm not super athletic or super physically gifted in really any regard. So when I've been dealing with like people who have beaten me in something before, be it a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match or a sparring match or a fight on the playground, going way back, the fear of the thing happening again, losing again, is just not really there. I've experienced the defeat a little bit too many times, and I did worry about this with Thug Rose. If you go back to my prediction video, I did wonder, this is Thug Rose rematching the only person that clearly just absolutely owned her. What does that do with her mentality? Because she always seems to be a bit of a mental headache case. And even though I picked Rose to win the fight, man, that devil's advocate came out to be really true and really horrifying. But I don't know if I can really give any insight on the whole thing, because it's not something I think I've ever felt. I mean, obviously you adjust and try to avoid the exact same fate from the prior time. But I think at the same time, few MMA fighters really adjust that much. I'm struggling to think of another rematch example that is similar to that. Like Rampage Jackson versus Vanderlei Silva, not terribly dissimilar to the first fight. And like other examples rolling on through. I'm trying to think of like a recent rematch. Like, to use Rose, actually, her second fight with Jessica Andrade, she came out and actually had a pretty good game plan, but it was very similar to the first one, which I think was the point that she had success in the first one. Carlos Barza was the only person who ever just absolutely dominated her. Actually, just gave her no hope at the time that she could win, that she had to develop skills. I don't know. It was a terrible, terrible fight. Let's leave it at that. And I don't think it's predictive of what's going to happen in MMA overall. I got a question here from Sonia. Favorite submission hold? Favorite submission hold. I think it's two horse race. I am a really big fan of the armbar from guard. See the Babalu Sobral Travis View fight. See the even Frank Mir Tim Silvio to a certain degree. Great armbar there with the arm snap. I do really like it. It's a relatively safe submission hold if you can lock it in for yourself. It doesn't have the problem of a triangle choke where you can be slammed or possibly damaged, or a heel hook, which of course is absolutely terrifying to apply, or a knee bar. And it doesn't have the boringness of a rear naked choke. And the other candidate is the guillotine choke, because I do happen to have actually a reasonably decent guillotine. So, I enjoy putting that on and making things happen. And the guillotine is also one where like you can do a lot of like simple adjustments and it becomes somewhat different chokes. Like there's the 10-figure guillotine, Jens Pulver kit there, the Deadliest Catch, Cody McKenzie's variant on it. There's a couple other different like submission holds, like variants of the guillotine. And I find that very fascinating because it's a really simple submission hold, very simple concept, but it's one that like has actually developed a lot of different variations. It's very cool, I think. Granted, it also leads into the Von Flue choke, which will be the Von Flue choke. I refuse to accept the Von. I refuse to call it the OSP choke. I would be willing to like kind of split it. The Von Prue, for example. I'd be willing to let that kind of be a name, but it will not be the OSP choke to me. No. And the final one is, would you like to see the UFC bring in an atomweight division? This is also from Sonia. This makes sense because she is atomweight sized. The answer is yes. I think the atomweight division is really exciting. And I think more. I've said this repetitively. I think more weight classes in the UFC is a good idea. It allows for less moments of like, for example, breaking down Viana and Richie, where it's just kind of a size battle. And it would probably reduce weight cutting to a certain degree to get the weight classes closer together. And weight cutting is tremendously unhealthy. So like I would be down with like, 165, like a weight class every 10 pounds, more or less. Like, that would be fantastic. Not the boxing route where there's like one every 3 pounds. That's ridiculous. But every 10 pounds, I'd be pretty okay with that. Anyways, those are the only questions I got. So this is the shortest podcast I have done. Feel free to send in questions at MioDread on Twitter, and the Discord that is in the description of the show is always a great place to join up and have fun. It's the home of the sim, and it's the home of this podcast. You can ask any question you wish, and when we get a slow card like this, I will do like kind of like a mailbag thing. Basically. There you go. So I hope you enjoyed. Like I said, this card, if everything clicks, is actually pretty entertaining, but it does lack meating. So that's why there's not a ton to break down. But they could be very interesting.